Good evening, everyone. I am John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff_2020. And this evening, I want to talk to you about the LaRouche plan for recovery. And what is the LaRouche plan for recovery? Well, I'm going to spend the evening talking about what I think is the only real organized, systematic way to get us out of this mess. Good evening to everyone. Hi, Corky and Tyrone, Living Soul. Thanks for being with me tonight. It's a pleasure to be here at McDuff channel doing my thing. Everybody's real keyed up and nervous about the election, but it's a lot more at stake this time than just a party, Democrat versus Republican, or whatever your knee-jerk issues are. It's a lot more serious this time. It's about the survival of our country as a republic and nothing less. So, very good to have you here. Well, tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and start with the content. Wow, 20 people here. Very good to have everyone. So tonight, let's spend a little time thinking together about what the mess we're in, and then what LaRouche organization has been thinking about for many, many years to try to sort out the mess we're in and find a path that will get us home to our republic and our Constitution and our Bill of Rights and all the things that we grew up loving and thinking we'd never lose. Well, we could lose them all in a very short few days right here in 2020. So the first thing I want to do is to listen to J. Kirk Wiebe. And J. Kirk Wiebe has been a NSA whistleblower since 9/11, and I think he's a voice that not enough people have heard. His comments on, this is 2 days ago now, his comments on the show that I was honored to participate in with their great team of Dennis Speed and Barbara Boyd, with J. Kirk Wiebe, and also with special guest Roger Stone. It was really a blockbuster show, and so what I'm going to do is start tonight by asking Kirk Wiebe to repeat his comments. Hang on a second, and I'll bring it up on the screen here.
Individuals, but we'll find out sort of as things go along. So, Kirk, why don't you get us started?
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Hello to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to be brief in my opening statement because everyone who is watching no doubt knows that we are in the biggest, most serious battle for truth that we have ever seen in these United States. I'm 75 years old, and never in my life have I seen the propaganda war, the censorship that's going on to stop the truth from getting out. I'm going to tell you that this is as bad in these United States, this so-called nation of freedoms. This is as bad as anything the Soviet Union ever did. And in fact, I'm going to tell you the censorship is probably more effective today than the Soviets could have done because they didn't have the internet at its disposal. Today, we have many news outlets, many social platforms, and yet most of them are distorting or blocking the flow of truth about the Biden family and about Anthony Bobulinski, the man who's blowing the whistle on the corruption and the international influence buying that's going on, or that went on, no doubt is still going on. It is absolutely shocking. And yet, if you look around you, you wouldn't know anything like this was happening. It's almost surreal. Everyone's going to work. People are getting paid. They're eating lunch. They're on vacation. They get in their cars. They drive. Everything seems normal. And yet our minds are being controlled by people who are hell-bent on denying us the truth. This is the most serious moment in our nation's history. And I worry about what this means for the near term, let alone the longer term. Dennis?
All right, I'm going to stop right there and going to now migrate back over to my channel so I can see your chat while we talk about this situation a little bit here. So you heard what Kirk Weebly said. He said this is it. This is the big moment. This election is the test of whether our nation will survive, just like Lincoln said it in the Gettysburg Address. Will this nation, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, survive? Well, it might not. And it's our judgment, my judgment, everybody I work with is judgment that if Trump doesn't win, then we don't have a chance. The only thing we can do after the election is to change the Congress. And the job one after President Trump wins, in my opinion, is let's start working on the Congress. And I'll tell you, I'll work here in my county where we have one of the most powerful members of Congress on the Democratic side. His name is Steny Hoyer, and he's been in office for, 30 years, I guess. He's elderly at this point. I am too. Used to see him in court. We used to have business in Prince George's County, in Charles County, and all the southern Maryland counties. But because he's a trial lawyer, he's a great lawyer. He's a fantastic orator, great speaker, and a true gentleman. But his policies are terrible. And we're going to have to talk about that after the election of 2020. But that's what I'm going to ask you all to look into, is your congressional districts and see what we can do about the draining that big swamp on Capitol Hill. Well, let's move on to my next presentation here tonight, which is Harley Schlanger. And as you know, Harley Schlanger has been a guest now on my show 3 or 4 times. Hoping to have him at least once a month. It's such an honor and a privilege to have Harley join me, and we get a lot of chat room and a lot of comments, and Harley gets questions from us that he takes through his email. Well, Harley's going to tell us what the LaRouche PAC plan is, and I've actually got my notebook, my yellow pad here, and my pen, and I'm going to write down the points so that I can try to organize this, what he's saying, into a maybe a 10-point plan or something like that. And I'll stop along the way so we can talk about it. So let's go ahead and bring Harley Schlanger up, and we'll get started with what I think is the best plan I've heard to get us out of this mess. This is Harley Schlanger 2 days ago on the 29th of October. Well, that's yesterday morning. Sorry. Okay, yesterday morning, LaRouche PAC, Harley Schlanger's morning report. So, and let's listen to him.
Completely overturn the axioms of the old system. Donald Trump, who is an outsider,
Let me go back and start at the beginning so we can...
October 29th, 2020. It's impossible to understand what is unfolding in this election without having a competent, full historic understanding that we're at a moment of the terminal breakdown of the present financial system. What we have is an election between Trump, Donald Trump, who is an outsider, the bull in the china shop, who came in threatening to completely overturn the axioms of the old system. And on the other side, the quintessential insider, Joe Biden, whose supporters intend to protect and defend this present system, even as it pushes us toward war and global financial disintegration. A dramatic correction is needed, excuse me, along the lines that Lyndon LaRouche has always fought for, but especially since the 2007-2008 period, when we went into a breakdown crisis from which we have continued to devolve. A breakdown of the Western economies, the collapse of the financial system, the deindustrialization of the industrialized nations, and an extensive looting of the poorer countries, which puts them on the verge of extinction from famine, from pandemic, and other kinds of crises, destabilizations, which could unleash a wave of refugees that would overwhelm the other parts of the world which are undergoing a collapse. Now, what does this correction mean? One, no more globalized free trade agreements.
All right, I'm going to stop right there and just make my notes. Number one, no more globalized free trade agreements. So you know what we're talking about here. We're talking about NAFTA. We're talking about the IPP and the various schemes to globalize an economy which takes it away from the courts and the laws of nations and puts it all under a global corporate body, or a corporate body to which the people belong, and they bind themselves not to go to court, not to rely on their governments for help, but to submit to the judgments of whatever this body is that's created, such as the IPP or NAFTA. And that's why NAFTA and these things are so dangerous, because they undermine the ability of the citizens to affect policy with their votes and otherwise. So that's number one, no more globalized free trade agreements.
These have always been fraudulent. They've been designed to protect the corporate cartels at the expense of sovereign national economies. Secondly, no more protection for bankrupt financial entities.
All right, there's a big one. No more protection for bankrupt financial entities. All right, I'm going to write that down. Bankrupt financial entities, like what? Well, like Merrill Lynch, like AIG, like all of the big banks that have been bailed out so many times. Well, why do we bail them out? Why don't we just let them fail? That's number two. No more protection for bankrupt financial entities.
Go back to 2008 and read what was done. At a moment of crisis where you had the potential to overturn a speculative system, a floating exchange rate system, go to a new Bretton Woods, a gold reserve financial system, new trade agreements based on multilateral rather than globalized free trade. Instead, Obama came in and went with the Wall Street City of London policy. And as a result, we've seen an unsustainable growth of debt, continuing collapse of the physical economy, to the point that today it's nearing the complete and final systemic breakdown. The third point, no to the fraud of the Green New Deal.
All right, no to the fraud of the Green New Deal. That's a big one to me. This Green New Deal has been a Rockefeller project, since World War II, and it's a big fat lie. urge you to look at the James Corbett reports on the Green New Deal. It's all a Rockefeller project to control everything and bring in GMOs and genetically modify nature, as has been going on ever since they started doing it in the 70s. So the Green New Deal is a fraud. Thank you, Harley Schlanger, for that. So that's number 3. Just checking in with you at the chat room, see how y'all are doing. Yeah. Corky says check 1, check 2, and check 3. All right, back to Harley.
This is based on fake science. It's an imposition of energy policy which will destroy the capacity to sustain life on this planet. We have 7+ billion people on the planet who need more energy, not less. And going back to less energy dense production methods, such as solar, wind, geothermal, and so on, will extinguish the possibility to have a real recovery that's necessary to sustain life of the 7 billion people.
So what he's saying is that all of these alternative energies things, the windmills and the solar and all, are not going to there's no way they're going to produce the energy that's needed in order to support the 7+ billion people that we have on the planet. And we need more energy sources and not less. So to take away our industrial base is to create famine, is to create refugees, is to create war, and is to create death, suffering, and all of the horrors that our country should be strong enough to avoid, not only for ourselves, but if we are given half a chance, we can take care of the rest of the world. We simply need to get this nightmare cancer out of our body politic. And Harley Schlanger is a great expert in exactly how it got there, and now we're going to help LaRouche, and all of us are going to have to work together to get rid of it.
Those are the economic issues. And most importantly, in addressing these is go with LaRouche's 4 laws. Banking reform, which includes return to Glass-Steagall.
Okay, so now LaRouche has 4 laws, and it's one of their themes is LaRouche's 4 laws. He stated this back in the 80s, I believe. So now Harley's going to give them to us, and I am now on number 4. So I'm going to add those 4 laws as numbers 4, 5, 6, and 7 as he goes through them. So
we're no longer going to protect speculators. Speculators have to deal with their own 4 laws. Banking reform, which includes return to Glass-Steagall. We're no longer going to protect speculators. Speculators have to deal with their own losses. They cannot be bailed out anymore. Now, I've often said we have the 3 no's on this. No bailouts, no bail-ins, and no bail for the criminals. That's got to be the policy that's adopted. Secondly, a Hamiltonian credit system, which makes government credit available the way John F. Kennedy was trying to do, the way Lincoln did with the Greenback policy, the way the Reconstruction Finance Corporation did under FDR in the anti-depression policy, where credit goes to real goods production and physical economy. That's the second law.
Okay, now his second law is what I would guess we've all thought of as the Greenback Law, or when John Kennedy signed an executive order to publish Treasury notes that were not dependent upon the Federal Reserve, but instead on the full faith and credit of the United States. That's one of the things that many people say was in the mix as to why he had to go. Well, the Hamiltonian system, and that is LaRouche's word for it, it means, number one, that the government itself issues credit and not a private bank, so that the government itself is supported by the interest payments that are made on the loans instead of those interest payments, although right now it looks like we're using federal money, but what we're really doing is using notes, promissory notes. The interest payment on those goes, of course, to the banks, to the Federal Reserve and the banks that it represents, and not to the Treasury, except for, we understand President Trump is putting a change into that. I don't think that's been put into effect yet, although many people are talking about him directing the Treasury Department to take over the Federal Reserve. Let's listen some more to Harley and see if he straightens this out for us.
The third law is that this should be carried out with an emphasis on infrastructure development, because...
Okay, I'm going to write down, my number 5 is Hamiltonian credit system. And number 6, infrastructure development. In other words, the loans that are issued are for infrastructure development. They're not going out for speculation.
That will create jobs and develop the skills of what is today an unemployable workforce of young people. And the fourth point then is that the investment should go into scientific research and development in new technologies and areas of scientific discovery, such as space, such as nuclear fusion. Those 4 laws, then combined with the adoption through great power agreements to put this system into bankruptcy reorganization.
Bankruptcy reorganization. Now this, I think, a light bulb went off over my head when Harley said bankruptcy reorganization. So that's going to be number 8. You hear what he's saying? He's saying that to reorganize the whole system. And what I think about bankruptcy, which, I've practiced law for many years and understand the basics of how bankruptcy works, this is the answer to me. That it's a brilliant solution, and that is that the whole Federal Reserve system that our dollars are based on is bankrupt. We just have to face it, and then we have to set up a bankruptcy court and sort out what to do about the creditors. And the fact is that there's so much debt that it could never be paid off, right? The debt that this country has now is astronomical. It's beyond the ability of all the people that we have in the country. If we were all able to work, full speed for our whole lives, we couldn't pay it off. The only way these debts ever get paid off is by refinancing, right? And who pays for that? Well, it's time to stop pushing all these debts off on our children and our grandchildren. It's time for these debts to be reorganized. And who better to reorganize it than a bankruptcy court? Because I think it's a brilliant way to look at it. Look, the system is broken because it's bankrupt. We cannot pay the debts when due, and we end up refinancing over and over again, which just is going to lead us right off a cliff, as Harley said at the beginning of the show.
And go to a new Bretton Woods would solve the problem that we've been facing of a drift into a speculative casino economy that's collapsed the ability to sustain life on the planet. Now, in addition to this, as part of a dramatic change, no more toleration of British imperial geopolitics, in which, what does this really mean? The U.S. has been roped in since the Teddy Roosevelt administration as the military enforcer, and especially since after World War II, the military enforcer of the City of London. The City of London and Wall Street have essentially merged their interests, and they are pushing for a global financial dictatorship. That cannot be tolerated. And then finally...
Well, let's stop and keep count here. So I put number 9, we need a new Bretton Woods agreement. The great powers get together and they find a new way to create currency that can keep its value and be traded on international markets, but is mainly there as a facilitator of trade and economics and not there as a way for banks to make money. So a new Bretton Woods with some value behind money. This is the age-old fight in the United States between the Jacksonians who say money has to be a commodity. And by a commodity meaning something that you can trade, something that has value, like a hunk of copper, a hunk of silver, a hunk of gold, something that you can actually count on as being something you can trade for some food or something if you really need to, as opposed to a piece of paper with George Washington and a very creepy-looking Illuminati triangle on it. So, time to reform with a new Bretton Woods. And Bretton Woods, of course, was the wartime reorganization of the financial system that pegged the British pound to the American dollar and all of that to gold. We need to get back to some type of a fiscal system that has real money in it. And I think that's what he means by a new Bretton Woods system. So that's number 9. Number 10 on my list is no more British imperial geopolitics. No more British geopolitics. Well, that's what we've been studying at McDuff Channel for the past 2 years, is what turns out to be efforts by the City of London and its allies in Wall Street to create a worldwide dictatorship of the banks, so that everything will be owned by the banks, everything will be run by the banks, and all decisions about who wins and who loses will be made by the banks. That is what he means by the British imperial geopolitics.
End the surveillance state and the role played by the tech giants, which include not just surveillance on everyone and data collection, but include manipulating you through social media, through profiling, and so on. You're worried about the social credit system in China? Well, according to Edward Snowden, we have the same thing and worse in the United States, but we don't know it because too many Americans are seeking thumbs up on their Instagram accounts to not notice that every thumbs up is actually a thumbs down for their ability to think critically. Now, if we take these steps, what we'll recognize is that the last 4 years have been characterized by a coup against Donald Trump, Trump the outsider, Trump who came in to try to fix this system and instead was thwarted by the existing networks in the intelligence community under Obama, the Defense Department, the State Department, the Justice Department, the permanent bureaucracy, which some people call the deep state, has acted to try and frustrate and sabotage any attempt the president has tried to make, including improving relations with Russia. With Biden, what you're going to get is an economic reset. And by that, I don't mean what most people think. The economic reset is the Green New Deal, and it's what BlackRock calls a regime change for finance, where all power goes to the central banks acting on behalf of the largest private banks. maybe through a global digital currency or some such manipulated solution, which will give them complete control not only over credit, which they currently have, but over spending.
Well, the Great Reset is his topic here. And the Great Reset is what the British system, geopolitics, the imperial British geopolitical system is bringing to us if we don't stop it. And the Great Reset, of course, is defined by the World Economic Forum. And you can go to their website and see this incredibly arcane, detailed, esoteric chart that has charts within charts, and you push this one and another chart pops up. I mean, it is a multi-layered system for their Great Reset. And the whole idea is we're not going to be able to own anything anymore. They're going to own everything. And it just gets worse from there. The Great Reset is the where we're headed if we don't stop.
Now, we've been warning the president, you can't take halfway measures. And as I said, he's been under siege from the Russiagate crowd, but also he's been prevented from moving ahead by the neocons and neoliberals in the Republican Party. And we need to sweep them all out. We can't do that by this election in a couple of days, but we have to do it in the next 2 years following a re-election of President Trump. The problem you have with half measures is that you're dependent on such things as the stock market as a sign of so-called recovery. And I've warned repeatedly, as has Helga LaRouche, that the Achilles heel of Trump is his decision to rely on the idea of an appreciation of the stock market. Why? Because the people who control the stock market can pull the plug. And that's what we've seen in the last couple of days. A significant drop yesterday, a 934-point drop in the Dow, the fourth straight day of significant losses. Now, the financial system was broken before the COVID crisis. As we've pointed out, in August and September of last year, the signal event was the Federal Reserve taking over the repo markets, that is, the overnight funding markets of bankrupt corporations and financial institutions, to stop a chain reaction collapse which would blow out the whole system. So they're saving the system at the expense of the people who have to live under it. This put President Trump in a vulnerable position. That's why we said this is his Achilles heel. Now, Wall Street funds are flowing into Biden's campaign and huge volumes of money. That's why he's got so much money. You think the little guy giving $25 is adding up that much? No, there's close to $100 million in the recent weeks going to Biden from Wall Street. So we have to address this from the top. Now, I would encourage people, go to LaRouchePAC.com and watch yesterday's press availability, which included J. Kirk Wiebe, from former National Security Agency technical analyst, and Roger Stone, who joined us for an incisive intervention into understanding what's necessary to ensure a Trump victory.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. We have our list, and we have also a warning at the end of the list about Trump's reliance on the appreciation of the stock market in order to justify his continued presidency. I'm going to move back over to the show and see what's going on in the chat room. Yeah, read The Great Reset by Klaus Schwab on Amazon. Hi, Jennifer. You're absolutely right. And you might have seen that 2016 video that went around where he shows where nobody's going to own anything. Yeah, and this is supposed to be something that we're going to like, right? Yeah, right. Well, okay, so I'm going to go through the list again, and I want to see if you guys agree with me, because I think this is the list that we need. We need something that we can put on one piece of paper and say, here, this is what we need to do, professor, doctor, senator, this is what we need to do. So let's go through it one more time. Number one, no more globalized world financial agreements like NAFTA. Number two, no more protection for bankrupt financial entities. Number three, no Green New Deal. Number four, return of Glass-Steagall. Number five, a Hamiltonian credit system. Number six, infrastructure. Number seven, new technologies, science, space, fusion, nuclear fusion. And that in conjunction with education programs, because I think it's a very important footnote he made that we have lots and lots of young people with absolutely no job skills. So by engaging in a program of infrastructure, we will have to have people that can do it, and that means we'll teach them how to do it. Number seven, new technologies, science and space. All right, we covered that. Number eight, the reorganization of our financial system through a bankruptcy proceeding. Number nine, a new Bretton Woods agreement. Number 10, no more British imperial geopolitics. And number 11, end the surveillance state. So I think that's, I thought I had 12, but 11. And then we've got to stop relying on the stock market, or the president does, to sustain the momentum of his presidency, because they can pull the plug. They can pull the plug. And they will pull the plug. And are they pulling it right now? These past few days have been a little shaky. The stock market's still up for the year, but it's not where it was 2 weeks ago. It's gone down a lot, maybe 1,000 points or so, as far as the Dow. So all of this stuff we've got to desperately push for, because we're getting ready to go over the cliff with this debt that is just unsustainable. And that's what we're all about right now. It's all about shifting the risk to the common people and shifting the profits to the elites. You know, it's heads they win and tails we lose. Heads they win, tails we lose. And hi Brightmore, the death knell will be complete digitalization of currency via blockchain. Yeah, some people think that's going to be a good thing, and I think it's going to be a horrible thing, because, I mean, I just see them digitizing everything that I own. You know, everything that I've ever done in my life will be on a digital record. But more importantly, any time they want to take some tax from my bank account, they'll just suck it right out of there. We won't have any word about it. We can't say, hey, I object to that tax. You can't take that. It's already gone. You know, the powers that be will bring it. Oh, Garden Girl, you're so right. We need to be self-sustaining. I've made this point before in studying my own county here, Charles County, Maryland. A wonderful book called The Price of Nationhood by Gene B. Lee. It's a history of Charles County's engagement with the American Revolution. And the first thing that jumps out at me is that Charles County fed itself. We were able to feed ourselves, and we had food surpluses. And if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have been able to sustain any type of a revolution. So now not only can they pull the plug financially, they can pull the plug on our food supplies. All they got to do is stop the trucks rolling to the grocery stores. You know, how hard is that? All they have to do is stop the big container ships from coming into the ports and the FedEx airplanes from landing. And all of this transportation system can be shut down. They can shut it down. Of course they can, if they have the power. Well, this is also what I think Harley is saying, is that, and I would add this from my own studies, is that it's Congress that's where the solution is. Solution to this is not in the courts, and it's not the president. The president cannot change the laws. It's Congress that has to reform the laws. As I've said many times, what's going on right now in this country since 1963, since the assassination of John F. Kennedy, our president, has been a coup d'etat. It has been a coup from that moment to this moment. And by saying it's a coup d'etat, I mean to say that whatever government is going on here is not our government. It's not the government that we were given by our Constitution when we, the people, decided to have an independent, sovereign nation. That was why they killed him, so they could get control from behind the scenes. And so what you see now is a bunch of school plays and theater, and it's a facade, a false appearance of democracy, a false appearance of a republic that has been created by the insinuation of their people. In the case of my father, into his office at Saxa, and broader into the case of the military, into the takeover of all of our branches by JSOC and the special operations people, and so many other secret things behind the scenes. The Bureau of Net Assessments, which no one's ever heard of, but this man named Marshall apparently has so much power that you see, he has a way to change policy without anybody knowing who he really is or was. Now, I'm afraid that we do have a problem with our fellow citizens, in the sense that I think most of our fellow citizens at this point are not trying to be citizens. That they're really trying to just be subjects and say, give me a government that will take care of me. You know, take care of me. Feed me, Seymour. You know? And what the heck kind of a citizenship is that, where you just sit back and say, well, what am I supposed to do now? Don't you love that when somebody says, well, what am I supposed to do now? What are we supposed to do now? Well, if you were citizens, you'd know what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to understand what the heck is going on in this country, and you're supposed to do something about it. You think that you can vote for a Joe Biden and suddenly everything's going to get better? It's not about Joe Biden, it's about the system. It's about the corrupt, rotten banking system that has drawn us into this terrible, terrible mess. And they don't know that that's not the best way to live. You know, they think the best way to live is to just make no waves, you know, do your thing, whatever it is in your life. You know, let's suppose you're a flute player or something, and you say, okay, I'm going to be the world's greatest flute player, and you get a great flute, and you practice and practice and practice, and you play your flute, and you know, you have a career, and you teach, and then you get a award, and then you kick back, and then you relax, and and then you pass away, and you're done. If your whole life is nothing but being a flute player, then you haven't done much in terms of citizenship. When did it say that you don't have to participate in your government? That's what they've done to us, is psychologically they've trained us to sit back and wait until we hear what to do from the television. And they have manipulated us in so many, many ways that I can't blame anybody for the situation, except for the social engineers themselves. Well, we need a plan. We need a plan to get back on track. And because the LaRouche organization has been studying this for 40 years, and because I think LaRouche is probably one of the most brilliant people that I've run into, I think it's really worthwhile to push this plan forward. The LaRouche plan: no more globalized financial trade agreements, no more protection for bankrupt financial entities, no Green New Deal, return Glass-Steagall, a Hamiltonian credit system, infrastructure development, new technologies, bankruptcy reorganization of the Federal Reserve System, a new Bretton Woods currency agreement, ending the British imperial geopolitical system, and ending the surveillance state. That's a pretty good list. I'd almost be happy to settle for one or two of those. Ending the surveillance state. Man, that's a dream, isn't it? How'd you like to actually end the surveillance state and stop worrying about Big Brother looking at us all the time? We as citizens have got to fix this. We can't sit back and wait for somebody else to do it. Yes, Glass-Steagall. Yes, Smith-Munt. Nan, it's always good to hear from you. Corky, Don, Guillermo. I think Housatonic is down with this. We need to roll back the technology, live more simply, but most importantly, we need to be empowered as citizens. We had an example, not too far from where I live here. We have a little children's playground, and we got to notice that they're going to replace the pretty fence there that works just fine with a black vinyl-clad chain-link fence 4 feet tall. And this is a beautiful little playground that we drive by every day, and it's got a fence already. It's just a pretty fence. It's a split rail, and it has rabbit wire type of, fixed to it, so kids can't get through it. You're not supposed to be there if you're not supervised anyway, but the point is that they didn't ask us. They didn't ask us, hey, do you need a new fence? They didn't ask us, would you like to talk about design? Would you like to see some options? Would you like to see some colors? Or maybe we could, avoid having to have a chain link. We could think of something else. Maybe you guys could have a fundraiser and have a nice looking fence. No, none of that. It all comes down from the top. And they're conditioning us to be that kind of serfs. That's what they want. They want serfs. They don't want citizens. But we are citizens. We've been trained to be citizens. We grew up in a free country. And ever since the death of John F. Kennedy, they've been taking it away. They've been giving us a fake version of democracy. And it's not really democracy. They're making all the decisions behind the scenes. And they're ripping us off like crazy. So I hope this has been helpful tonight to organize what we need to fight for. we need to fight for these 11 principles. And to keep it organized like that, to say, okay, here's my list. When you have a chance to see one of these politicians, talk about it. When can we get Glass-Steagall back? When can we have our own Hamiltonian credit system and get rid of the Federal Reserve? When can we retire all that debt through a formal bankruptcy proceeding? When can we sweep the corrupt, the blackmailed, the lying people that are occupying our hallowed halls in Congress? When can we sweep them away? Well, the key to it all is this election. We've got to elect President Trump for a second term. This is another chance that it's just so much like John Kennedy, because John Kennedy in his second term would have done all these things and more. And America would have been the shining light for the free world. But no, they had to take him away and take away our freedoms. Well, we see it. We have the plan. We understand what we have to do. And it's an uphill fight, but I'm with you. I know you're with me. And we must win this. We simply must. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll see you in the morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, for Saturday Morning with George Webb, right here on McDuff _2020.